reverse sear. We're going to put them into a very hot skillet and see what happens. Again, put them away from us. I really love to grill out, and I actually have 3 grills on my back patio. And during the summer and nice weather, I grill out almost every night of the week. And one of my favorite things to grill is a nice, juicy, thick steak. But I'm going to show you a method today that you've probably heard about. Once you master this method, you may never want to cook a steak on a grill again because it's so good. Welcome to All Things Food with John Woods. I love to cook, but I cook to love. So let's talk food. So I told you that I love to grill. So the other night I took some beautiful steaks home. They were about 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick. And I wanted to cook those on my grill. But a terrible storm came up in our area and it lasted for hours and hours. And there I was with a hunger for those beautiful steaks. So what did I do? Well, I reverted to one of the great methods of all time to cook a steak, a real restaurant quality steak right there in my own home. And that was seared steak in a skillet. And I'm going to share with you some of the basic principles today to help you really cook a really fine quality steak right there inside your own kitchen. So let's go. So the first step is we want to select a good quality steak. If you're going to spend time cooking a steak and spend the money cooking a steak, be sure you buy a really good quality steak. Don't skimp and buy a cheap steak. Find one with good marbling. If you're not exactly certain how to select a good steak, talk to your butcher and they'll be glad to help you. But it starts with a good steak. Tip number 2 is temper your steak. So many people will take their meat, whether it's a steak or a pot roast or whatever it is, directly out of the refrigerator at 40, 41 degrees and put it in a skillet and try to cook it. That's really not a good idea. It's always better to temper your steak and bring it up to room temperature. Now, a lot of videos will tell you to put it out for 20 or 30 minutes, but I did an experiment today to tell you that that's not near long enough. So I took these beautiful New York strips out of the refrigerator, temp them at 41 degrees. At this point, they've been in room temperature, 68 to 70 degrees, for almost 3 hours. Now let's check the internal temperature and see what they are at this point. It looks like they're not even quite 60 degrees. So whenever you temper a steak, be sure you put it out at room temperature in a room that's 68 to 70 degrees for an extended period of time, 2 to 3 hours at the very minimum. And I think you're going to find you're going to have a much better quality steak by doing so. Point number 3. If you want a good seared steak, remove any moisture. I always take a paper towel and I try to blot it dry as much as possible, removing any excess moisture. Always remember that moisture is an enemy to searing. We don't want to steam our steak. We want to sear the steak. So we're going to remove all the excess moisture as much as possible. Our 4th step is we want to adequately season the steak. And remember that seasoning is going to require more than you actually think. When you put the steak in the skillet, after you season it, it's going to lose about 30% of the seasoning that you put on it into the skillet. So how do we season the steak? Well, the simplest thing to do, good old salt and pepper. And I always like to use kosher salt. Do not use table salt. I have a table salt here. This is a no-no. You don't want to use table salt on just about anything, especially a good steak. So get some good kosher salt. I like Diamond brand. It's really good, fine, coarse salt. And I'm going to salt it very generously, both sides. And we'll get some good coarse pepper. You can use ground pepper, but I'm just going to use this already pre-ground pepper here. Generously season both sides. And then I'm not only going to season both sides, I'm going to take it and turn it up on its edge and season the edges of the steak. We want that seasoning to be permeating the entire steak. So there's a good seasoning. Now, there's a good seasoning that I like to use a lot of times if I'm not using salt and pepper. I love Montreal steak. It has garlic and salt and pepper, really a really fine steak seasoning, and I love to use this whenever I can. Another good one is Weber's Chicago steak seasoning. So it's whatever your preference, but if you're in the bind, you have salt and pepper, that's exactly one of the best ways to do it. Step number 5 is select the right skillet. Whenever you're searing a steak, you want to use something that's real heavy. It will stand up to a lot of heat. Of course, the best option is the good old trusty cast iron skillet, one that's well seasoned. And so what we're going to do too, we have a stainless steel skillet over here on my induction burner, and we're going to bring those up to temperature, get them very, very hot, and before we add the oil. Now let's talk about the oil. I like to use a avocado oil because it has a very high smoke point of 525 degrees. A good substitute would be grapeseed oil, even though it has a smoke point of only about 425. I think avocado oil is always the best choice. It's mild, it's nutty, it's sweet. It's just really a good choice whenever you're searing a steak. So once these skillets get hot, we're going to add the oil. Don't add the oil first. Wait until they get hot before you add the oil. So it looks like our skillet, this cast iron is pretty hot. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple tablespoons of oil, not too much. And we're going to sear the steak. There are a couple of things you can do here. There's one thing called a reverse sear, where we actually start the steak in the oven, probably cook it at 300 degrees and on a preheated sheet pan for maybe 15 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the thickness of the steak. But I usually cook it almost to about 20% shy of the doneness that I'm wanting. So you start it in the oven, and that's actually what I've already done for you today. We pre-seared these in the oven, and we're going to finish those in the skillet here, and that's what we call a reverse sear. Now the skillet's pretty hot. It's not going to take very long to do this, maybe about 2 minutes on each side, and then we're going to have a really, really nice steak. Put it in away from you. Listen for that sizzle. Press it down to make certain it's getting full coverage there. And we're going to let that cook for about 2 minutes. At this point, I'm going to add a couple aromatics, a little bit of thyme, a little bit of rosemary. Just throw it right in there. Come over here and add some garlic, a couple cloves of garlic. And then we're going to put some butter in. Let that melt. And we don't want to move our steaks around a lot. Just let the skillet do the work. Don't flip them. Don't flop them. Just let them cook. We'll take some of that butter and baste up on the steak here. It's been about 2 minutes. We're going to turn those over. Check them anyway. Let them cook just another minute or two. Continue to baste. Our other skillet over here is getting fairly hot. And add some oil to it. Let it get good and hot. Remember, this is the pre-seared reverse sear method, and this one here we're just going to sear right on the skillet. We're going to cook this for about 3 minutes on each side once that gets warm. And turn these over. Another 2 minutes, since we've already pre-cooked these a little bit. Continue to baste. Nice and crisp on the outside. They're looking absolutely beautiful. I can hardly wait to try those. So these steaks are sizzling hot. I'm going to take them out of here and put them on a plate and let them rest for about 5 minutes or so. Don't want to cut into them right away. Take some of our aromatics and throw on top of that. Set these aside and let them rest for just a few minutes, and then we'll enjoy. Here we have have the two steaks that we did not reverse sear. We're going to put them in this very hot skillet and see what happens. Again, put them away from us. And don't overcrowd your steaks. When you're cooking on the skillet, don't put too many steaks in at one time because, again, it'll steam the steak rather than searing the steak. Press that down to make sure we have good coverage everywhere. I'm going to throw in my aromatics, thyme and rosemary, garlic. And then we're going to let that cook a minute or two. Then we're going to throw in some butter and baste it. Okay? It's time to turn these. Let's let them cook just another minute or two. And I always like to let them cook that first 3 minutes actually before I put my butter in there. Again, that's your preference, but that's kind of the way I like to do it. Really smells wonderful. Those aromatics really adds a lot of flavor to the steak. Nice golden brown and crispy. Go ahead and add my butter in here. And then we'll baste these steaks with that butter. I'm going to cook these to about a medium rare. That's my preference, probably about 130 degrees internal temperature. Let's talk about checking the temperature of a steak. A lot of people are afraid to use a thermometer for some reason. And I guess they think it's just the wrong thing to do. But if you're going to cook a good steak, don't have an aversion to using a thermometer. Try to get a good digital thermometer. And when you check the temperature of the steak, be sure to go to the side of the steak, right into the very middle. And you need to leave the thermometer in there for about a minimum of 15 seconds for it to register properly. We're one of these steaks to be about 130-inch or so. And let me check over here and see. It's like we're at exactly 129 degrees internal on that steak. So that's exactly perfect. These are going to cook 3 minutes on each side. We're going to pull them out, let them rest. We're going to check the temperature and let them rest. Now there's a little trick if you don't have a digital thermometer or a good thermometer. You can kind of check the doneness of a steak by touching the palm of your hand. That part of your hand right there, in your palm, where it's real soft, that would be the feel of a rare steak. If you move your finger up a little higher there, maybe put those two fingers together, that would be like a medium rare, medium well, and a well done. So you can just feel the steak. Like right now, that's exactly a rare. It feels just like that part of my hand. If I wanted a well done, it would feel like that part of my palm right there. So right now the steak feels rare, but it's getting the desired doneness. Now once a medium rare, and we're getting pretty close. Right about 117. I don't think you can actually get a steak any better than this. It'd be hard to. So now's the moment of truth. This is the steak. These are the steaks that we reverse seared. We started those in the oven, cooked them for about 10 minutes, and then finished them in the skillet here. And then these are the ones that we seared in the skillet, cooked completely in the skillet. Now we could have actually started these in the skillet, searing them in the skillet, and then finishing them in the oven. That's a good method to do as well. These here we cooked completely in the skillet. So let's cut one open and see what we have. Again, I was looking kind of for a rare to medium rare steak. Exactly what we were looking for. Nice, beautiful meat. So I'm going to try a bite of this and see how it is. Flavor's magnificent. Texture is really good. I give that steak an A+. Okay, these are the steaks that we actually cooked in the skillet. Again, I'm looking for a rare to medium rare steak, the way I prefer it. Texture's good. Color's good. let the thing rest for about 5 minutes or so. And I'll take a bite. This one's a little rarer than that one, but that's kind of the way I wanted it actually.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Cook with Ron. Today's episode, we're going to be doing ribeye steaks. These are 24-ounce bone-in ribeye steaks. They're kind of dry aging in my refrigerator for the past couple days. I kind of make sure the steaks are super dry before you start cooking. And I had them out at room temperature for about an hour now. The internal temp is like hovering right around 60, 65 degrees right now, so that's good enough. We have our ingredients ready. We've got our butter, rosemary, thyme, some cloves of garlic. Obviously, we have our coarse salt, kosher salt. We have our coarse black pepper. I'll be grinding. I have a little bit of garlic powder that I kind of use as a cheat for my basting process, and then of course cooking oil. And then I have some ingredients here, some mushrooms and some diced mushrooms, and also some onions that I use to create some kind of a mushroom sauce after I'm done with my steaks. Today we're going to be using a cast iron skillet. I have that here. And I'm going to be doing both steaks at the same time today. So we're going to try to make it work today. Hopefully the sear doesn't get screwed up, but let's see how it goes. And of course I have my mashed potatoes over here that we're going to use our mushroom sauce with. So just the regular instant mashed potatoes. Sometimes you gotta do what's easy, right? All right, I'll see you guys in a bit. I'll show you guys how I prep the steaks. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is make sure your steaks are very dry. So pat them with a paper towel and make sure that both sides are dry. More a little bit of a wipe. That way, your sear, your crust will be better. Because if you have a moist steak, when that hits the pan, you're not going to have as good of a crust. So just make sure it's thoroughly dry before you start adding your seasoning. It's sticky enough that the seasoning will stick to it, and you'll see how that happens when I start doing it. Okay, so first we're going to add our coarse salt. Now this is kosher salt. These are thick steaks. They're 24 ounces, as I mentioned. So they're going to need a lot of salt, because obviously only the surface gets the salt, and the rest of the steak really doesn't get anything. So, be liberal with it. Don't be shy with the salt. I'm going to do both sides. I'll pat that in a little bit. I'm going to do both sides, and then, actually no, sorry, let me do the coarse black pepper too while this side is exposed. Make sure you get some seasoning on the board too. I'll show you why in a little bit. But it's okay if it falls over. We're just going to pat the steaks over the seasoning and make sure we get everything. Okay. Now we're going to pat that in, flip, get the other side. Again, be liberal with it. This is a thick steak. Okay, I'm gonna pat that. Again, coarse black pepper. Although the pepper grinder is not being cooperative right now. Oh, there we go. Okay, now we're going to pat the sides. Get all that stuff that fell on the board. Get all the sides all nice and seasoned. And our steaks are pretty much ready to hit the pan. Get that fat cap on the side. That'll run her down. Make a nice crusty piece of fat you can actually eat too. So, okay, that's it. Make sure everything's there, nice patted, dry. ready to go. Now we're ready to start cooking. By the way, not sure if I mentioned this earlier. These steaks have been tempering outside for about a little over an hour now. And a steak this thick to get up to room temperature takes actually a couple of hours. I have an instant read thermometer here, which by the way, I highly recommend getting one of these, especially when you're cooking meats and stuff. Even now, the internal temperature right now is right around 60-ish degrees. I mean, it's not quite room temp yet, but it's close enough. Again, if you have the time, I didn't today, but if you have the time to like take this out 2 hours in advance, that's even better. Get it really up to room temperature. That way you get a better cook. So just want to let you guys know that. Okay, so my pan has been on the flame and on the fire for about, I would say 5 minutes now. It's on medium-high heat. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but you can kind of see the smoke coming off of it. So that's how I know it's really screaming hot. Another test I could do is the water test, where I take a little bit of water and throw it onto the pan. I can show you guys how I do that real quick. See that? It's like almost instant. Sometimes you see the water even dance around a little bit in the pan before the evaporates. You see that? So that pan is pretty much ready. It's ready for the steaks. I'm going to add a little bit of cooking oil to this, just a little bit, just a smidge, and then we're going to put the steaks down. Okay, so I'm using canola oil. It's a high smoke point oil. Don't use something like an olive or something like that. That's not going to work very well for this kind of sear. You're going to have a lot of smoke and not so much sear. The oil is just going to basically smoke too early, and it's not going to be very good. So use canola, sunflower oil, vegetable oil, whatever you have around. That'll work for pretty nice. You can probably look online and see like what folks use as a high smoke point oil. All right, now steaks are going in. Okay, have a decent sizzle. Unfortunately, I got to cook both steaks today in the skillet for the essence of time. I've never done it this way before. Usually it's like do one at a time. And we'll see how it goes. Hopefully the sear is pretty good on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this go for about 2 minutes per side. Maybe 2.5. 2.5 minutes. These are thick steaks. So I'm going to let it go for about 2.5 minutes per side. Now some folks, they like to keep flipping it every minute, minute and a half. I think that's okay too. I've done it both ways, and the crust was still okay both ways. So, I mean, I guess it's preference, right? But for this video, we're just gonna do one flip, and then we're gonna take it off. 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes, take it off, and then get the basting session ready. So, see you in a bit. Okay, so it's been about 2.5 minutes. I might even go 3. These are really thick steaks. So it's going for 2.5, almost 3 minutes. I'm going to give them their first flip. There you go. See that? That's very nice. Okay, another 2.5, 3 minutes. Okay, so the other side has been going for another 2.5 minutes. I turned my exhaust fan on because it was getting smoky in here, so I hope you guys can hear me okay. I'm going to give it, I'm actually going to take it off the flame now. So this is the way I do it. I'm going to take a quick check of the temperature of the steak. So the middle is only like right around 95, 94 degrees, so it's not quite a ways to go. But I'm going to take it off and start getting my
If you are slightly more of an introvert and struggle to make friends,
today it's all about steak. And by steak, we're talking ribeye. It's beautiful here in Ohio. We've had warm temps. We're going into the spring. We've got Mother's Day coming up, Father's Day coming up. What better time than right now to talk about steak? We're going to do the ultimate comparison on these ribeyes. We're going to do bison. We're going to do 100% grass-fed beef. We're going to do grain-fed. And we've got one more for you. Let's go in the cooler and get it. The piece de resistance, the American Wagyu, obviously an animal that we butchered right here. You're going to see us rib it on camera. By rib, I mean we're going to break between the 12th and 13th rib and find out what kind of marbling we have. Let's talk a little bit about why we call it Wagyu. A lot of people have said that's not how you say it. It means Japanese cow. The wa and yu sounds a little ridiculous to maybe give it that kind of pronunciation, but I think we're pretty darn close.
May I do the honor stuff?
You sure can. This is always the fun part. Woo! That moment of truth when you reveal. Get up close there, Spencer. That beautiful, intense marbling. That's why we saved this one to break on camera, because that is pretty. That's one of the reasons why ribeye is a personal favorite of mine, is all of that fat in there. Fat is flavor, fat is an excellent mouthfeel, and fat is a ton of incredible good energy. All that intermuscular fat, like Scott said, can't be beat. Beauties. Wow. Now comes the heavy lifting. 466-pound half. So this front quarter probably weighs somewhere 275, 280-ish, somewhere in there. Welcome to our gym. I just wonder how many carcasses this hook. Look at that. It's not even welded. I think it's brazed. I have no idea. That thing's easily over 100 years old. Makes you wonder how many carcasses that puppy has jumped off that rail. You notice that all the other primals, we already broke off the animals. We wanted to save this one and make it special. So come out on the floor. We're going to get this one ribbed out. We'll get them all cut. We'll show you how it happens. So there we have it. Wagyu, bison, grass-fed, grain-fed. Come along for the ride. Should be fun. Trying not to breathe too heavy into my mic after lifting that animal. Let's get this ribbed out. We're going to cut the plate off. We're going to cut these ribs off, and then we'll pull out the rib section, and I'll show you how we're going to break it down. And then we'll go through each primal and we'll break them down, and then we'll cut them into steaks so you can see the difference on everything. Aren't they beauties? Seth's got these broke down, and he's getting ready to take them through the remaining steps. But before he does, I wanted to point out, you're going to see a little bit of a different color. That's just the varying stages of aging, so that we could marry this video up together. We brought these out here. The bison and the 100% grass-fed beef have been on the shelf a little bit longer, so they've had that exposure to the dry air. And once we break into them, you won't see really any difference. But if you just look down through the line here, you're going to see the difference in the marbling. We're on the truck side here. We also have some exciting news. So we've been working with a couple different companies that ship meat online. We've been trying the products, and we want to give you guys some of the resources where you can order products similar to this delivered right to your door. So later in this video, towards the end of the video, we're going to give you some of the resources where you can get the bison, the 100% grass-fed beef, the all-natural grain-fed beef, or the Wagyu beef. We'll put links in our description so you can go straight to those links, and you can order very similar, nearly identical products right to your door. So we want to interject that, but as Seth gets to breaking these down, my mouth is going to water more and more because these look amazing. I can't wait. Starting off with bison. Let's get this broke down. Grab my meat hook. I'm going to peel the membrane off these ribs. We're going to save these ribs because I know there's going to be a barbecue master out there somewhere that's going to die to have these on their smoker. So let's just get started fabricating this primal. And you can see, we talked about this in other videos, you can see that these feather bones here are a lot longer than the beef. We've talked about that with that hump on the bison. You've seen us break these down before in some of our other videos, but this one's going to be pretty neat to see all the different species next to each other. Now, if I was to leave this whole, this would just be a rib roast, but we're going to cut it into steaks today. Using my knife to find that natural seam, applying that downward pressure. Just peel this right off of there. Exposing that paddywhack. Yellow cord. And I'll hand all these trimmings off to Scott over on the boning table, and he'll trim them out for some ground products.
What about Sean?
Sean was MIA this morning because he was mixing up cheese in the back. So since we have it to this stage right here, we're going to go ahead and remove these bones. Like I said, these are going to make a barbecuer really happy when they come into our store and find these in our meat case. Some bison back ribs sounds pretty delicious. So using the tip of my knife right along that bone, just like that. Knocking off a couple of these rough edges and these, a little bit of those tails. That, my friends, is a bison ribeye section. On to the next one. 100% grass-fed beef. Raised right here in Wayne County, Ohio, by the Berger family. Same thing. Just gonna go ahead and remove this membrane. Just like that. Now you're going to notice first thing when you see this is the color is similar to bison. It's leaner like the bison. These feather bones are a lot smaller. So if you look at the back on this, that hump, it's a lot larger. And here we just have a much smaller frame. So I'm just going to remove these bones. Do the same thing here. This one being dry aged, you can see that it's a little bit darker. This natural seam here, it's a little bit drier. So you'll notice the difference there. Let's remove this yellow cord. Remove the backbones. Making these nice long cuts like that. So a little bit of trimming prior to cutting. And there you have the 100% grass fed. Onto the grain fed. You can see these primals are getting larger as we go. Remove these feather bones. Whenever you get into these larger primals, they're a little bit harder to maneuver just based on their size. It takes a little bit more muscle power to get things separated and peeled apart. Just clean things up just a little bit. Time to give my Victorinox boning knife a little tune. I want to take a minute and talk about this for a second. Our videos, people are always like, when you sharpen your knife, how come you're sharpening it over top of the meat? Aren't you getting metal flakes on the product? That's certainly not the case. This is a smooth honing steel. And all we're doing is rolling that edge back into place on this knife. So if you see us sharpen our knife, tune it up on the steel, we're not cleaning it afterwards, that's because it's not producing any metal flakes. Just a little FYI there. Get these back ribs off of here. There we go. I like to pre-trim my primals a little bit before I cut them into steaks, because if you knock off the rough edges, then when you cut into a steak, you don't have to go back through and do it to each individual steak. This makes things a little bit easier in the long run. Now, for that beloved Wagyu, highly marbled, tons of intermuscular fat, beef ribeye. I'm always amazed whenever I'm cutting Wagyu cattle how soft the fat is. I mean, it's just like cutting through butter. Sounds a little cliche, but really it's true. Now with this back fat on here, this is when I really have to get those forearms working. Get that separated. A little bit of help with my knife. Just slowly work that down. Just like that. Pull this little cord out. Oh. So same process on each primal. As you can see, each one is so much different. And the more fat, definitely the more challenging that it makes it. We always say that, not that we like to talk about it, but fatter the carcass, the more percentage of cutting yourself is, because you're using extra force to work your knife down through there. Sometimes that can result in your knife slipping or something like that, and you cut yourself. And there you have it. Wagyu, grain-fed, grass-fed, and bison. Who wants to see these cut into steaks? I know I do. 10-inch Victorinox, it's going to be the trick. We're going to start with the bison. Trim off just a little bit of that dry aging, that discoloration there. We're going to cut these nice 1.25 inches thick. Look at that. Dandy ribeye. That big portion of that cap on there. A little bit of fat on the inside. But you can see that there isn't a ton of marbling in that muscle. And that's common with your bison and your elk and your venison and things like that. You're going to get that outer fat, but you're not going to get that inner muscular fat. And I can tell bison is super tender. Knife's just gliding through there with hardly any resistance at all. Grass-fed beef is up next. Move my bison out of the way. Boy, if you were at a weekend cookout and these were laid out in front of your guests, I know they'd be in for a real treat. So there's the bison. My tag on there. Same thing with the grass-fed. Trimming off that dry aging portion. So let's do a little comparison here. You can see the difference between the bison and the grass-fed beef. How much longer that steak is. That ribeye cap, a little bit more of a triangular shape versus the grass-fed, which is round. Grass-fed beef has a little bit different color to it. Bison is a little bit more darkish red, has that irony look. Grass-fed, both of them are super lean. A little bit more of the fat on the inside of that cap, a little less here with the grass-fed. Still very minimal intermuscular fat on either of those. But beautiful steak nonetheless. Here again, I can tell it's a nice and tender cut. Now, the one thing you do have to think about when you purchase grass-fed or bison is that since that cut is so much leaner, you're going to have to be a lot more careful when you cook it, that you don't overcook it, because it doesn't have that fat in there to sort of have that little bit of forgiveness. It'll dry out in a hurry on you if you overcook these. Up next is the grain-fed. You may wonder why we chose the ribeyes, and as mentioned earlier, simply because this is the most popular steak, in our opinion, on the animal. It's the most desired. Some people may argue that, you know, there's better ones on there, and we're not going to disagree. But overall, ribeye is the most popular. So, time for a little comparison here. You can see that intermuscular fat, that marbling, a lot more intense on the grain-fed. It's going to have even marbling up here in this cap. Bring in the bison, the leanest of all three. But you can see the significant difference between those three steaks in leanness, fat content, size. It's all coming through. So if you happen to buy a rib section at the store, a whole rib section, make the investment in a good knife, because it's going to be a game changer for you. If I tried to cut through this with my 6-inch boning knife, that's all I would do is struggle. But since I have this nice 10-inch knife, it just makes a big difference. Now it's time for the Cadillac of all beef, the Wagyu. Just gonna square it up just a little bit. This is what we call the butcher's take. Throw those on the grill, nice thin slices. Boy, delicious. And we own these, so we buy these from local farms. So when I say the butcher's take, that doesn't mean that we're taking something from somebody's custom cattle or something like that. We own it, so we're free to throw that on our own grill. Just to clarify. Are you ready for this, Spencer?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. This, my friends, is gonna be a beauty. Look at that. That is just beautiful. So if we take these now, compare these to the bison, we have that intermuscular fat all the way around that cap. We have all that marbling on the inside of that eye. Just an absolute dandy of a steak. If you compare the grain fed to the Wagyu, you can see the difference there. A little bit lighter, a little bit paler color in the meat compared to that darker cherry red. The fat is, that marbling is the most significant thing on these steaks. And fat is most definitely flavor. Just absolute beauties. And there you have it. So let's get all these laid out on our table. We can do the ultimate comparison between these ribeyes. What do you guys think? Bison, 100% grass-fed beef, grain-fed beef, and Wagyu. Which one would you choose? I know that they're all going to be incredible. Depends if you're coming at it from a health reason. Maybe you want the bison or the grass-fed beef. If you purely want just some intense flavor, you're gonna have to go with one of these highly marbled steaks, because those just cannot be beat. So now that you've seen all those primals broke down, you see them on the table, you see the comparison, we're gonna run some of these through our roll stock machine. We're gonna choose which ones we want to pull from this. We're gonna take these to the grill. We're gonna cook them, and we're gonna do a little comparison. So come on. I think that one's got my name on it. I think I can handle it, bro. Good job is done. Except when it comes to eating, you're eating you. Explain the blue tongue.
So Norway and FFA, which we support heavily, which is our local high schools, Future Farmers of America.
Who our niece and two nephews are a big part of.
Yeah, so they nominated us for the honorary member at the highest level for the state. We're already honorary members for our local chapter, but and we got it. That's amazing. So they presented us with the award, and it came with some cupcakes. That was like an hour ago. So I ate a cupcake with blue frosting. Now I have a blue tongue.
So without further ado,
the steaks, you saw us cut these this morning. So we moved out to the Big Green Egg, and we're gonna get these cut up. We already cut them up. We're gonna get them grilled up. 100% grass-fed, the American Wagyu, the beef, grain-fed beef ribeye, and the bison ribeye. So I've let these set out at room temp for about 45 minutes. And now all we're gonna do is get a little bit of olive oil on them. Get these packages opened up. Some people wonder why we package them if we're just gonna be cooking them. The answer is that that was this morning that we cut them, so we didn't want them sort of lying around our cooler and then transporting them out here to where we're cooking without being in the package. So that is the reason why we put them in our packaging. Starting off with our bison ribeye. Beauty. Our grain-fed beef. Another beauty. That Wagyu dandy. Last but not least, that grass-fed ribeye. Now what we're going to do is put just a little bit of olive oil on these, on that outside surface. A little extra virgin olive oil. Give them a flip. Today with grilling these, we're not going to do anything super fancy as far as a reverse sear or anything like that. We're simply just going to just pretty much straight grill them. We got the grill up to about 400 degrees. And then we have our cast iron grates in there. And we're just going to do a nice grill. It would help if I opened my bottle of seasoning before I start to shake. It's what little brothers are for, carrying their big brothers around. Absolutely. So we're going to put a nice even coating. Not too super heavy, but just a nice flavor of the original blend on there. And we're going to season them with the same flavor of seasoning for all 4 different steaks. And this isn't really going to be a winner. We're not going to pick a winner. We're just going to go through and sample them and tell you the differences, the juiciness, the tenderness, the flavor profiles, fat content, and etc. But this original blend is a nice blend of spices in there to give it an even flavor profile throughout. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one thing I'm going to have to be careful when we grill these is that we don't overcook the bison and the grass-fed, especially because it does not have that fat in there for forgiveness. So these we're going to have to pay real close attention to. I'm not going to want to take these much over probably that 130 degree range because I want a nice medium rare inside. Now that we're seasoned, our grill is pegged right at 400 degrees, and we're simply just gonna lay them on our grates. Scott, I need you to help me remember where we placed them. Grass-fed, Wagyu, grain-fed, bison. So just remember, grass-fed, bison, Wagyu, grain-fed. Not a problem. It's time to do a little 45-degree turn. Seth's put me on thermometer duty because we've got so many different profiles going here. Want to make sure we don't overcook anything. I told Seth, we're both private pilots, both have our private pilots lesson, and they taught us in flight school, aviate,
It's that blue tongue.
aviate,
Is it swelled up a little bit?
no, aviate, navigate, communicate. Just means you should fly first, and like if you have an engine out, fly the plane, look for a place to land, then start telling people about your problem. So I told them, I was like, focus on cooking. I'll help you out. And we're looking awesome. Better double check that grass fed. We're just about rest status done. Yeah, I get it out, get it resting. Bison is right behind it. Did you test him? Did you test him? I did.
Let me test him.
Sorry, I'll throw you off this deck. I poured. Looks real good. So the only one we have left is that grain fed. Ow. We're done. And there you have the steak cook. Grain fed, Wagyu, bison, grass fed. Rest and eat. Rest and enjoy. We're gonna move indoors. We're gonna take this party inside and we're gonna sample some. We've rested the steaks. Now it's time to sample them. Bison, grass-fed, grain-fed, Wagyu. We're gonna start with the bison. We're gonna work our way down through. Like I said, this isn't really a challenge to see which one is the best. We're just gonna go through them. We're gonna discuss flavor profiles, tenderness, etc. You ready? All right. So starting with the bison, I gotta go for the cap first. Boy, look at that. That just looks insanely delicious. Go ahead and grab yourself one. Juicy, juicy, juicy. Oh, it's got that immediately. If I had my eyes closed, you didn't tell me what that was, I knew immediately it was bison. It's got that sweetness that we know and love about the bison. We've talked about this before in our bison versus beef video. The cornerstone that our business was founded on was bison. Go ahead and get a little bit of that fat. Absolutely. That's where it's at right there. Bison has a unique fat flavor. It's not gamey. It's not necessarily like wild game, but it's not like beef either. It's its own unique flavor. The biggest thing is people might expect it to be gamey. That's not the case. That's sweet. It's sweet beef is what it is. Yeah, if you didn't know any better, you just think it's really good beef. So that was the bison. On to the grass-fed. Grass-fed beef has a what'll happen is you're usually tasting whatever grasses that the beef is eating. So there's a little bit of that like iron, kind of that. It's more like a deep beefy flavor, like a. I could definitely pinpoint that one too. If you handed that to me, I didn't know what it was. I don't know it's grass-fed beef. It's got that bigger, beefier. I wouldn't describe it as metallic, but I think you're tasting the mineral content in there. And it's not like it doesn't throw you off. No, it's just different. Mm-hmm. Significantly different than the bison. Like olive oil versus butter. Same thing. Yeah, it just has a little bit different. Now, one thing we have noticed with the grass-fed, let me get a piece of this fat here. If you try this fat, you might be a little bit surprised. Just go ahead and get yourself some of that. Because
with grass fed, we've noticed that the flavors can be a little bit strong in the fat.
Not much there.
Not
Get a
bad.
little bit of the dry agedness, 'cause that one's in
Yeah.
the cooler for a little bit longer. A little bit of that, the caramel nutty flavor that it can take on when it's been dry aged for a period of time.
Yeah, so if you are gonna pick up any of the, the more intense flavors, it's gonna be in that fat. And in this one, like Scott said, we didn't notice that. Very good steak. You can see both of these are just cooked. Let me flip around here so you can see it. Cooked to a nice, beautiful, medium rare. We want to be certain that we didn't overcook these.
This is a really tough job that we have, Seth.
Isn't it?
We gotta butcher up these animals and we gotta dine on it. It's
Steak aficionados. That is something we should talk about, is the fact that we did in fact butcher these. So that, that makes a big difference when you butcher them in house. So time for the grain fed. And here again, I'm just gonna hit this cap because that ribeye cap is certainly our absolute favorite on a ribeye steak.
I'm expecting like a little bit more of a
Yeah.
buttery flavor. Yep. More like what you're used to at a steakhouse, pretty much. Like
Now, we didn't use any butter on these. We didn't use any toppings. There's no sauteed mushrooms. There's no caramelized onions. We're just eating steak that was grilled with the original seasoning, some olive oil on the big green egg. And if you set this in front of anybody, they would just be absolutely blown away.
it's fine
with it.
dining, in my opinion.
It is. I'm
And
enjoying it.
something different, like you said about, the fact that we butcher it, so we know everything about it.
Now, let's go over just a little bit of that fat on that. It's just gonna be like eating a little slab of butter.
Very mellow, very melt in your mouth type.
Yeah, very good. Better grab another piece because I'd hate to see these sit there and get cold.
Wow, outstanding.
So, as far as tenderness goes, I'd say if I had to pick one out of these three, maybe the grass fed is just not quite as tender as the other two. The bison,
More of a texture, like almost a firmness.
the bison and the grain fed were, I would say, equally as tender. And there again, I mean, that we did dry age that one longer, so I'm sure that does play a role in it. Now, onto the Cadillac of beef, that fine Wagyu ribeye. Let's get a hold of that cap.
I'm expecting this to be more of a velvety, smooth, sort of like just
You ready for this?
Yeah, like eating cake.
Oh, wow. Now,
It almost
it,
doesn't require chewing.
no, it's so soft you can smash it between your tongue and the roof of your mouth.
Wow, that's how it's such a it washes over in your mouth so nicely.
So good.
It's just like I said, it's like eating a velvety smooth.
Now,
It's fantastic.
I said we weren't going to choose a winner because this wasn't a competition. We grew up on bison our whole lives. I mean, we've eaten bison since we were toddlers. If you asked me which was the most tender, it's got to be the Wagyu beef.
Yeah, that mouth feels completely different.
And it just depends on what you're going after as far as flavor.
Yeah.
So, the bison, the Wagyu, if I had to choose the winners, it would be those two. And out of those two, the Wagyu by far is more tender. But overall, I mean,
If I'm looking
Wow.
to celebrate anniversary style dinner, that Wagyu is
just
unbelievable.
treat yourself. Now let's go ahead and get a little bit of that fat. It's gonna be like eating a piece of bacon.
That flavor, there's a lot of flavor in that, but it's such a rich flavor. It's like, I mean,
So good. Now, I gotta point this out. Spencer's filming this thing, and he has to sit here and just eat these.
Oh my god.
I dug a third fork out of the drawer,
Oh.
Spencer.